Today, we are diving deep into a legal tightrope walk. Your right to privacy in your own home versus the police's duty to save a life. And believe it or not, this whole thing kicks off with a single, disconnected 911 call.
Okay, so imagine this. You're a police officer. A 911 call comes in, but the line just goes dead. You get to the address, a man answers the door and says, "Everything's fine here." So what do? Do you just walk away, or do you force your way inside? This isn't just some hypothetical question. This is a real case that went all the way to Canada's Supreme Court.
All right, so let's set the scene. It's the early morning hours, and we're at the apartment of a man named Vincent Godoy. What happened here on this one morning would end up completely redefining the balance between privacy and safety in Canada.
And things escalated fast. You gotta understand, a disconnected 911 call is treated as a top priority. So when Mr. Godoy tried to just shut the door on them, the officers had to make a split-second decision. They forced their way in. And what they found was grim. His wife, injured and crying. The arrest that followed got violent fast.
So there you have it. The charge is assaulting a cop during an arrest. I mean, the police found an injured woman and the guy broke an officer's finger. Seems like a pretty open and shut case, right?
Well, nope, the trial judge threw the whole thing out. Godoy was acquitted. And just like that, the whole situation got flipped on its head. Suddenly, it wasn't Godoy on trial anymore. It was the police's actions.
So you're probably asking, how on earth did that happen? Why the acquittal? Well, it all boiled down to this fundamental conflict. Where does police power end and the privacy of your own home begin?
You see, the judge's reasoning was pretty powerful. A person's home is their castle, right? He basically said that a disconnected call and a guy saying no problem at the door, well, that's just not enough to justify breaking into that sanctuary. And if the police entry was illegal, that meant the arrest was unlawful. And you can't be guilty of resisting an unlawful arrest. See the domino effect?
And this is really the heart of the whole battle. You've got these two massive legal ideas just crashing right into each other. On one side, you have the absolute right to be secure in your own home. And on the other, you have the duty of the police to protect people's lives. The Godoy case was a direct collision between the two. So when the case went to the appeal courts, how did they figure this out? They couldn't just go with a gut feeling. They used a specific legal framework, something called the Waterfield test, to decide if what the police did was actually lawful. Now, this test is actually pretty straightforward. First, you ask, were the police basically doing their job? You know, something like protecting life. Then, step 2, even if they were, was the way they did it, in this case, barging into a home, a reasonable use of their power? For the police's entry to be legal, the answer to both of those questions had to be a big yes. So, step 1, that was the easy part. The courts totally agreed that responding to a 911 call, which is really a cry for help, is absolutely part of the police's fundamental duty to protect life. No debate there. So the entire case really came down to that second question. This is where the real balancing act comes in. The court had to weigh the huge importance of investigating that cry for help against the pretty serious intrusion into Mr. Godoy's privacy. Was it truly justifiable? After bouncing through the appeal courts, the case climbed all the way to the top. The Supreme Court of Canada was going to have the final say, and that decision would set the rule for the entire country. And their decision was crystal clear. The Supreme Court sided with the police. They ruled that forcing their way into that apartment was in fact legal and completely justified. Godoy's acquittal was officially a thing of the past. So here's how they broke it down. A 911 call isn't just a phone call, it's a cry for help. And in that moment, the duty to protect life has to come first. They also made this incredibly important point. You can't just take the word of the person who answers the door, because that person could be the abuser trying to cover their tracks. And the fact that Godoy tried to shut the door, well, that just made the police even more suspicious.
This quote from the decision it nails it. The court was looking at the grim reality of situations like domestic violence, where a victim is often silenced. Their logic was, look, if someone is in so much trouble that they can dial 911 but can't even speak, they're probably not going to be able to answer the door and ask for help either. Safety had to come first. But, and this is a really big but, this was not a blank check for the police. Their power was super limited.
They could go in for one reason and one reason only, to find the person who called and make sure everyone was okay. Once they did that, their authority to be inside was done. It was absolutely not a license to just search the place. And this ruling, which came down in 1999, wasn't just about this one incident. No, it created a major legal precedent that still guides police and emergency services across Canada to this very day.
So a legal precedent is kind of like a rule book created by a past court decision. The Godoy case basically wrote the rule for this very specific, very high-stakes situation. What do you do with a weird 911 call when the person at the door is trying to send you away? At the end of the day, this case is a masterclass in legal balancing. It confirms that our homes are sanctuaries, but it also says that our collective need for an emergency system that works, that answers every cry for help, can sometimes justify a limited, temporary intrusion to save a life.
So the Supreme Court drew a line in the sand. They prioritized the urgent need to protect a life over the sanctity of a home in this specific kind of emergency. It's a powerful decision, and it leaves us all with a pretty heavy question to think about. In that exact moment, faced with that uncertainty, where would you draw the line?